And the high today is expected to hit 34 degrees, UV index very high. Scientists are warning that this is the 5th heat record broken this year. Farmers are already projecting that crop yields could be dangerously low.
You don't think I care about the planet? It keeps me up at night. I mean, I'd love to take transit or ride my bike again or even carpool, but it's just not practical. I'm not a climate denier. I know it's real. I get it. But there's just nothing I can do about it.
In survival mode, and quitting is not an option. Who are you?
A friend of mine was just telling me about if global temperatures rise past 2 degrees Celsius, we go into this feedback loop, and then there's environmental collapse, economic collapse, and I just said, look, I don't want to talk about it. I want to mime about it.
Today we are announcing, holy shit, this really does look like an extreme climate emergency declaration.
Isn't this park great? It's like our own private escape here in the city.
You know what you can't escape, Ruth? Climate change.
The oceans are rising. Don't you think it's time for us to rise up too?
What are we waiting for?
Thank you. I'm Sandy Crawley with the Artists for Real Climate Action. I'd like to greet you from Hamilton, Ontario, Haudenosaunee Territory in the Niagara Peninsula. And my other associates and partners are in Toronto, which is the traditional home of the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas of the New Credit, and many other First Nations. First of all, to tell you more about Artists for Real Climate Change, you'll see more of our content in a few minutes, is the person who began this whole organic thing, Liisa Repo-Martell.
Hello, everyone. It's been so inspiring to be here today and listen to all these amazing speakers. We feel very honored to be in this company, and we hope that we can be helpful by sharing some of our experience in climate communications, which I'm sure is relevant for all the SDGs. So I just want to give you a little brief history of ARCA. It is brief because we are young. We don't look it, but our group is young. We're a loosey-goosey group of artists and actors and filmmakers and some social media types and writers whose focus is essentially to create video content that sounds the alarm on the climate crisis. And we formed just a couple of years ago in advance of the 2019 federal election. And our mission was to put climate issues at the top of the election agenda. And our origin story is that I was kind of losing my mind because climate issues were nowhere as a priority in the spring of 2019, it seemed to me. And the election had already been announced and there was no coverage. It just seemed way down the list. And I was still just reeling from the 2018 IPCC report with that 12-year terrible grim timeline about cutting our emissions in half in 12 years or facing irreversible climate catastrophe. So I spontaneously, I'm an actor, not a writer or filmmaker or anything, but I spontaneously reached out to my Facebook community and said, does anybody want to make some climate action propaganda in advance of the next election? And I got a big uptake. And long story short, there were sort of 30 people in my living room 2 weeks later. all with a great deal of storytelling experience, but and passion for and terror about the climate crisis, but no experience in what we eventually did. So very quickly we determined to make a series of public service announcements, kind of ads, asking Canadians to vote for the climate in the 2019 election, and then we begged, borrowed, and stole and cajoled our way into making around 20 videos, which we raised about $23,000 to push them out on social media and release them all through the 2019 election, which turned out to be the climate election. Not saying that it was us, but so that's a brief overview of our origins, and we continue to make video content and collaborate with NGOs and help organize and inform the kind of artistic community around climate issues. So I think that's over to Liisa, who's one of our founding members as well.
Hi, everybody. I'm coming from Toronto as well. And I guess my origin story is I was sitting in my basement with my child and my partner watching the first Reform. And it was a movie that had a climate action element and climate emergency element to it. And in the middle of the movie, my young teenager turned to me and said, this isn't really real, right? Like all these fires and floods and extreme activism stuff, this isn't like real. And I took the converter and I put the TV on pause and I thought, I gotta move into this. I gotta go at this. So I said, yeah, Jess, it's real. And he said, well, what are you doing about it? And I thought to myself, oh my God, what am I doing about it? Like I used to be one of those people who went door to door asking for money for pollution probe. And then I got swept up into being an actor and living in a capitalist world and buying a house and being a mom. And that focus had left me. And so I took his urgency and his sort of, I guess, almost existential crisis, and picked up the phone the next day and called my friend Robin Steven, who is an activist as well, and said, what are we going to do? Can you help me? Let's do a film or a TV show or a play. And she said, oh my God, you have to join this group. Liisa Repo-Martell has started this group with all of these actors. I said, but I'm not an actor anymore. She goes, it's okay. We need filmmakers. And I said, okay. So I did show up to the 50 people in Liisa Repo-Martell's living room, and I looked around and there were a lot of actors. It was fabulous. And I thought, okay, where are the filmmakers? And there were like 3 or 4 of us, and we all sort of figured out what our skill sets were within the group. And because I had just come from helping to launch an eco school with Robin Steven, I understood how to break things out into committees. And so I took the ear of a couple of organizational minds within that group and said, let's start committees, let's break it down. So my organizational mind kicks into high gear and we start thinking about, okay, we need a committee for community outreach. We probably need a committee for production, and we need a committee for fundraising. And the list went on and on. And then I guess from there, I basically became a part of a supervising team of making sure that the productions, the short PSAs, propaganda PSAs, got out, pushed out onto social media. And one of the other people who was integral to the production side was Gord Rand. And I'm going to introduce you to Gord now so he can tell you how he started in this world. Gord.
Hello, everybody. My name is Gord Rand. I'm primarily an actor, but I'm also a director and a writer. And I guess it started for me back in the 1980s when I was in grade 10, and I was researching what was then called the greenhouse effect for my high school's model parliament. And it was terrifying. And then as time went on, it was like all nightmares, and nobody around me for the next 20 years or so seemed to notice it. So there was this impending crisis and the world was heading towards, and everybody was pretending it wasn't happening. And it felt very lonely. And there was really no way to talk about this emergency. Like if I brought it up at parties, I was either a fool or I was a crazed maniac or a real downer. And I'm sure that there's a lot of people on this call who have experienced that. So when a like-minded group of artists decided that we were going to dedicate our skills to sounding the climate alarm, it was a tremendous relief to me. I suppose I wanted to dramatize the fears and dreams and various scenarios that were playing out in my head. And I thought if we could succeed in making sketches and films that addressed those fears and hopes, then we would be able to help people stop feeling like they themselves were crazy. We could create fellow feeling in the audience and possibly help us to organize our thinking and our action as we move forward into climate action. And one of the people that I met at that legendary meeting at Lisa's house was the powerhouse extraordinaire, Sandy Crawley. So I'd like to throw it over to him, Sandy.
Hi, yes, I'm here. Am I here? Yeah. Well, I hadn't thought about it so much in a personal way. Actually, I was greatly blessed by having a very successful filmmaking family and my mother, who was a dedicated scientist. So I was aware of the impending, going back to, the Silent Spring and the Club of Rome and, the limits to growth and all that stuff. So I was primed for it. And it's been clear to me, and I'm kind of a political junkie. So it was clear to me, I think about 20 years ago when the UN remarked through research that all over the world, people were unhappy with their governance structure, whether it was a dictatorship or an autocracy or a so-called democracy. Everybody was getting restless. And there were good reasons. And then when I saw what Liisa reached out, to me, it was like, yes, it's right. This is the time for this to happen. And, I have, when we went to that first meeting, it was wonderful. There was a sensitivity to it. I don't know if it was Liisa or a couple of people who kind of said, okay, let's find out who we are, because we didn't all know each other. And some of us were close, but some of us we'd drawn each other in. We were all in this sector. We were all from the entertainment sector, whatever. But it said, well, what do you? I forget. It was one of those sort of California type questions, like what brings you here? What moves you? I said, well, I've got 3 wonderful children. I have 5 gorgeous grandchildren, and I care about what's going to happen to them. So that was it. But to me, it was an amazingly organic thing. I mean, I realized Liisa sort of informed me even within the last few days how much organization went into it. But there was never an obvious sort of power structure here. We're going to have, and it's just organic. I'm sure we all come from the communication sector, so maybe that made it easier. But I know these citizens movements that I've been engaged with since I really got involved through ARCA, a bunch of NGOs, which Liisa mentioned. There's an amazing movement going on, and I'm really glad this conference is bringing some of that together, and that we really start testing our governments and our political processes and pushing them, because obviously incrementalism is not going to solve the problem. Anyway, we're going to get more into what we've produced and how we produced it. So let's look at some more, in a little more detail, of the wonderful work of ARCA.
This is not a drill. Ferocious forest fires in BC and Alberta. Record flooding in Ontario and Quebec. Sea levels rising all over the Atlantic provinces. We are on the verge of a complete ecological collapse. I mean, it's so bad around here, it's almost biblical. But even in the Bible, they only said the fire next time. Nobody said the one word about the fire and the flood. Hi, I'm Mark Delahunty. And here in Canada, like in the rest of the world, we're in a real cluster of climate change. Oh, it's Armageddon time. We are this close to seeing the 7-headed beast rise up out of the blood-dimmed tides of the sea. No wonder we're all staggering around, whacked out of our gourds on opioids. Oh, yes, there is hope, just not for us. All that we got left is action. That's why this October, at the very least, you gotta tell your federal candidate that unless they got a real, honest-to-God plan for climate action, they won't get your vote. The oceans are rising. Don't you think it's time for us to rise up too? So get out there and fight like your life depended on it, because, let's face it, it does.
Brace yourself, this could be heaven or hell, 'cause there's a fortune to tell. Is it the din of defeat or your liberty bell? I'm better alive, just like Bonnie and Clyde, sharing that shotgun ride. Do you feel shamed and framed and haunted inside? Well, anything without it is a mystery. Every single morning is a victory. When everything is covered in the ashes of yesterday. I'll brace yourself, shake those skeletons out.
Okay, thank you. What we've announced today is an extreme climate emergency declaration.
Minister, how does that differ from the 2019 climate emergency declaration?
Right. We've added the word extreme here, so clearly it's longer. Thank you, that's it.
Is today's announcement the result of the recent flash flooding?
Okay, I don't think we want to alarm anyone here who's still dry. But today we are announcing the new and improved extreme climate emergency declaration. Okay? That's all. All right, shut up! Today we are announcing, holy shit, this really does look like an extreme climate emergency declaration. Now, what that means exactly at this point...
While we've been dealing with a global pandemic, Doug Ford has been quietly making plans to set off a carbon bomb in Ontario. Instead of phasing out fossil fuels, Doug Ford is planning a massive increase in gas production, raising our greenhouse gas emissions from the electricity sector by 500% or more. Ontario used to be a climate champion. We literally led the world in getting rid of dirty coal and went from having 53 smog days in 2005 to 0 in 2014. We now have one of the lowest carbon energy grids on the planet. But Doug Ford wants to roll back all that progress and make Ontario grimy again. Good question. Well, Ontario's nuclear plants are getting old. They're kind of like that rusted out Chevy in your neighbor's driveway, only the bodywork on these babies is going to take billions of dollars and many years to fix. So meanwhile, under Ford's plan, we'll just fire up the gas and keep grilling the planet. The good news is, we don't have to. We could buy clean water power from Quebec at half the cost of what we get from our aging nuclear plants, and invest in new wind and solar, now the cheapest forms of new energy production in the world. But that would make sense. And remember, this was the guy that spent $230 million to cancel 750 renewable energy projects. That's right, $230 million to get nothing. Join the movement to phase out gas in Ontario at ontarioclimateaction.ca.
I'd like to say a lot of things, but mainly I'd like to tell them to listen. Protect your mother. Safety. Bring your hands. Protect our future.
fighting for green jobs, good climate jobs, good union jobs.
System change, not climate change. I am so sorry.
COP26, we've already heard the message that it's code red for the climate. We need leaders, all of you, to step up.
Time to ask for her future and for all of ours. Thanks.
To listen to
the scientists and people like us.
A friend of mine was just telling me about if global temperatures rise past 2 degrees Celsius, we go into this feedback loop, and then there's environmental collapse, economic collapse. And I just said, look, I don't want to talk about it. I want to mime about it.
Blowing up person, dead person, important person. Yeah, a dead person walking up a chain.
Yeah, not even close, thanks. Yes, sometimes it feels like an uphill battle, but uphill battle also happens to be one of my signature moves.
I wonder if we can get your reaction to the climate change mime. Do you have any idea what he's trying to say?
Oh, it's no.
This is not a drill.
Okay, we want to field any questions that anyone participating in this wonderful conference have about the kind of work we do. And but in the meantime, I'm going to hand off to some of the people who actually created this work for nothing. My main thing was just to run interference downfield with one of our professional unions, so it wouldn't we wouldn't end up having to pay or be penalized for doing this work because of what we believe in. I think we're going to start with Liisa Robertson, who can tell you something more about how we actually created some of this work, and Gord and Liisa to follow.
Thanks, Sandy. Yeah, we're not sure where you're all going to be coming from or how this material that we present to you will apply in your lives. But if you have a cell phone, you can make something like this. Because we had numbers and we had this community of very strong artistic people, we thought it might be after the George Floyd incident happened, we thought I think we need to start to think about being more BIPOC. And so we brought people into something that we sort of brought together as a writing room. And so we had about 9 writers in a writing room. This is for the second, I think, this second campaign that we were working on. But we did have a writing room for the first one. But the first one, we hadn't brought in the BIPOC. So a writing room is basically just saying to everybody in your group, hey, here's an idea, here's a premise. We want to make sure that we put climate action as top of mind when you go to the ballot box. Come up with some ideas. And so people went away, and Gord and Rick came up with that fantastic climate mime. Liisa used her skills to gather people in her world with her connections as an actor. She had been working on a film with Mary Walsh, and she said, does anybody want to work with Mary? And I said, I will. And then we got all of those scripts together, and then we worked them through, like which feels like it's going to move our audiences more, their hearts and minds more. And a lot of changes were happening. And what was wonderful about the group is that we were all really open to notes with each other, and this works better than that, and that works better than this. And but everybody had a chance to kind of express their feelings about what they wanted to say, and then ultimately went out and produced it with either their phone or a camera that I happen to have a few GH5s that I gathered throughout my career, and a few lights. And then, so the writing room then evolved to a BIPOC writing room. And I think I wanted to share a couple of stories about bringing on powerhouses like Mary Walsh. And when I think about what you guys would be able to reach out to is think about the communities that you're in. So if you're in a scientific community, who would have a voice in your community that would bring more people onto into this movement that we're all trying to create or escalate. So with Mary, because she has a following, I thought, yeah, you know, she might be a really good adversary, so, or somebody we can work with rather. And so Liisa reached out, said, Mary, do you want to talk to Liisa? And I got a call. I was sitting by the water. I was really relaxed, and I got a call from Mary Walsh, and I just sent her a script that was basically about what happens when a woman is dealing with a fire in her kitchen. And I get this on the other end. Liisa, it's Mary Walsh. It's not dramatic enough. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I have come up with a couple of other ideas. I did come up with one where there's a burned down forest. And she said, good, I like it. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, I have to find a burned down forest, which isn't really easy. But I got off the phone and called my fireman art director friend and said, Mary Walsh is willing to do a spot with us. I know you're a fireman / filmmaker. Any ideas? Like, do firemen, do any demos in the surrounding Toronto areas? And he said, no, possibly, but I'm clearing land for a house I'm building. And why don't you guys come up? I'm like, oh, wow, okay. So I flew Mary on my frequent flyer points to Toronto. Trish, who lives down the street from Liisa, made a bunch of chili. We borrowed Robin Steven's car, and she basically rode with Mary, picked her up at the airport, and we all drove to Aurelia. And we set up, and I was there the night before, helping Chris to move trees and basically build the set deck of the forest. And then Mary showed up the next morning, and people were it was a buzz. The whole community was so excited. I was a little nervous about where I was going to put Mary, and the neighbor, the neighbor came over and said, she can stay at my place. Like, it's fantastic. So you just got to ask. You just got to show up with a lot of passion and just ask people who you know in your community who want to be involved. And you'll be surprised as to how many people come out and volunteer their services, whatever their skills may be, if it's preparing food or, I've got a backyard you can borrow. But get creative and don't be afraid to reach out and ask those people to join you in this action. So I'm going to pass this over to Gord, who did the wonderful Climate Mime spot.
Hi, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the films. One of the things I think we wanted to do with this presentation was to suggest ways in which you can engage, as Liisa mentioned, when you want to engage your friends and colleagues and family and so on. We kind of have this fantasy, at least I do anyway, that there are the kind of DIY climate propaganda groups all over the place, just all through Canada, people making videos and putting them online to spread their particular area of expertise. And I know there's a lot of areas of expertise present here today. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the Climate Mime film at the end to give you an idea how it came together and hopefully provide you with some information that may be helpful for you if you're interested in doing this kind of a thing. Rick called me up after one of the ARCA meetings that I wasn't at, but Rick has always done a funny character, which is a bad mime, which is essentially hilarious. So we both kind of loved the idea. And as we were hashing out the idea over phone and email, we thought, well, how do we make this mime become a climate hero? Like, how can he communicate ideas about complex scientific and cultural ideas about the climate? Like, does he have graphs? Does he, we were trying to work out different moves he could make that could explain rising sea levels or tipping points and so on. And we were frustrated. We realized at that moment that the frustration of the idea was the key to the idea, because the mime couldn't explain anything. He was ineffective in telling the climate story. So that became the joke. And it ended with our tagline, which was silence doesn't work. It's time to raise our voice, or something like that. So in that way, kind of an inkling in our head, sort of as we hashed it out, turned into kind of a nice ironic twist that we could then make into a film. So he came over. There was a climate action happening on Queen's Park, pre-COVID, obviously. And he came over in the morning, and I just filmed him getting ready in the bathroom. I filmed a bunch of shots of us traveling to the rally. And Rick would just improvise jokes the whole way. So, the thing where he coughs on his own makeup, I thought that would be a good keeper. Also riding the streetcar, other people are actually holding onto the rail, and he would hold onto an imaginary rail, which was quite funny. And, the Toronto public didn't quite know what to make of it. But so we spent the afternoon filming and getting people's reactions to this film, as you saw in the movie there. So it's fairly self-explanatory. Now, when we came back, as what happens with I think with any film that you might try to make, whether it's super scripted or whether it's mockumentary, you're going to have a whole bunch of footage that you didn't realize you were going to get, and you're not going to have some of the footage that you planned to get. So then it comes down to editing. There are a couple of editing software that is free if you're interested. iMovie is the obvious one. You can do a lot of things with iMovie, quite complex things if you set your mind to it. As well as DaVinci, which is a much more complex editing suite, but it is free and it's very user-friendly. So once we got onto that, I picked up kind of the best jokes and we started to form a story about it. One of the things to keep in mind when you're shooting is to prioritize your sound. And I've had that note given to me quite a bit. Sound, people will forgive a bad picture if the sound is good, but they won't do the opposite. So your sound has to be good. So you can get, if you're using, say, I used a DSLR, which is your basic kind of, photographer's camera. I had a separate recorder and a couple of mics. You can do this with an iPhone as well. You can put a lavalier mic, which is a throat mic that you wire onto your speaker, and it directly goes into the iPhone. Or you can get a cheap boom. You can get them off of Best Buy for anywhere between $20 and $50. You can attach that to a broomstick and hold it close to your subject's face, out of frame, obviously, like that. And then you'll get nice, clear sound. And then you can isolate the sound from the surrounding hubbub, which is certainly what we had to do with the demonstration. I just want to close out my section here a little bit with some tricks that might help you to get some good production value. On one of the spots, I used a skateboard and I put a block of plywood onto it, weighted it down. I put my tripod on that, and you could move it back and forth, which gives you a dolly effect, which is quite nice, and it costs nothing. If you're shooting a speaker, often it's good to shoot them wide and close, and also from another different angle. That way you can cut up what they're saying, but you can also get a visual dynamic of it. What else is good? But just pay attention to your color and your framing. And I think that's probably about my time, isn't it? So maybe I'll swing over to Liisa Repo. And Liisa, you were responsible mainly for the Doug Ford video, as well as lots of other things. But that was the one really your area of expertise that you learned quite quickly and pulled off masterfully, I thought. So I'll send it over to you, Liisa.
Expertise is certainly an overstatement. Yes, I kind of was, again, kind of driven wild by the facts presented to me by the Ontario Clean Air Alliance about Ford's plans. And so I reached out to them and said, can I make you a video? And what were they going to say? It was free. So again, it was during COVID, so there was not an opportunity to shoot anything. So I've been sketching a lot during COVID and not working as an actor. So I had some time on my hands. And so there's this very simple animation software called Flip-A-Clip, which is what I used for it. But I also wanted to move on to some other things that sort of guide our storytelling emphasis, I guess, as ARCA, because I know a lot of you out there maybe not even thinking of doing DIY stuff yourself. Maybe you're part of larger organizations that may want to put bigger resources into these things, or maybe you just want to, blog about it, or any number of acts of communication. So one of the kind of the wonderful gurus that we've met along the way is this woman named Amber Bennett, who is one of the top climate communicators in the country. And we kind of have had these instincts ourselves a little bit, but she's been very confirming and very helpful. And I just wanted to share a few things with you about kind of what works and what doesn't work in terms of climate communications, according to the social science research that she's done. And I guess like what we're all on about here in every aspect of the climate activist community from at every possible intersection is to build the social mandate for change that we all know needs to happen, and to build it at the scope and scale that is required to meet this moment of existential threat. So that's basically creating the public will for change that has yet to kind of manifest itself, and kind of understanding that governments do not lead, governments follow the public will. And the good news is that there is a climate majority in Canada. The majority of Canadians understand that climate change is a big problem. There's a big support for clean energy. Our national media has basically accepted the need for real climate action. Impacts are really showing themselves in people's everyday lives in a way that is really bringing home the reality of climate change in heat domes and floods and fires. So what's the problem then? If everybody's on side and everybody knows that it's a big problem, isn't our work done? But no. So the problems that still remain in terms of communication out there are that 45% of Canadians, while they're very concerned, they are not engaged, and they are not very literate even about the basics of climate change. Like apparently less than half of Canadians can identify what greenhouse gases are and how they contribute to climate change. So that means the support for policies out there is unreliable. And so people don't understand the path forward for energy transition in a way that makes them not, support things like 50% of Canadians still support an increase in fossil fuel infrastructure, for instance. So anyway, as you can see, there's a lot of room for communication out there just to get the necessary facts out. But another part of Amber's research, and perhaps more crucially, is that it confirmed what we probably all know, is that people gloom and doom doesn't motivate people. People don't also like to be lectured or shamed or overwhelmed with math. And especially in these polarized times, the messenger is really, really important, even perhaps more important than the message itself, which may be depressing. But what is true is that folks listen to people that they see as like them, and that share their values. And a powerful, powerful social motivator is to see that other people like you care about the climate. So we need a lot more voices, a lot more faces in the climate communication sphere that are beyond sort of scientists and policy wonks and environmentalists. We need to change the face of the messenger and just emphasize the importance of positivity. And what Amber says is that we're not going to scare people awake. We need to create stories that help people imagine an energy transition future that is filled with hope and possibility and agency and freedom and isn't just all broccoli. So that is my offering to you about the kind of messaging that works. And we would love to take any questions that you have.
Yeah, there are a couple of great questions from the audience. One of them is, first of all, I'd like to make a pitch. What you've seen, people, has been done not only for nothing, but actually at great personal expense. Liisa Robertson gave an example of using her flyer points to get Mary Walsh here. And you know, the professional people have put in, well, at one point we figured $400,000 worth of professional time without a penny. Okay, we're actually being compensated for this presentation, which is a wonderful eventuality. And this leads to the question, a good question we got then. What new projects do you have underway, or do you have any? Well, I just want to mention that through my involvement with ARCA, I now go to about 6 or 8 Zoom meetings a week with various climate groups. And one of them is Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment, who are gearing up. They're doing their fundraising. They're doing all the steps that Liisa Robertson really described that we did. And what their goal is to ban the advertising of fossil fuels and vehicles that use fossil fuels. And, you know, it's like, well, what? That's, you know, well, we did it with tobacco, didn't we? So that's our example. So here I am. I have some good roots with the Performers Union. Another member who's joined CAPE there is with the Directors Guild. One of the things we'd like to do is say, okay, let's find impassioned performers, directors, professionals who want to do this and get the unions to let us waive our fees and all that stuff and get this stuff happening. So that's an example of the kind of thing. I'm pitching ARCA, then I say, come to ARCA. That's when you get some money, give us, you know, enough to get it done, and so that we're not, you know, starving our children and so on. Anyway, so I just wanted to mention that, but let's, anyone else from ARCA, we want to talk about some new projects that might be underway. I think that Lisa and Lisa have one, anyway, that you might like to tell us about.
Yeah, we're sort of gearing up for the next election, the Ontario election. And we've made all sorts of really exciting connections with different NGOs and doctors and seniors for climate action. So we're hoping to, with those groups, identify, you know, several vulnerable conservative ridings and do our part in toppling this climate change denying government by identifying ridings that are vulnerable and targeting messaging directly to those ridings through social media. And some of the funds that we get for being with you guys today, we are going to spend on Facebook ads. So yeah, so that's our next project, and also rebooting some of our old material for this June's election.
Yeah, and I wanted to add to that we also just came off of something for the City of Toronto, where they commissioned us to do a bunch of spots. I think the city has been overwhelmed with COVID, so it's kind of moved down the priority list, but it was a big undertaking. We did get some money to help with production, and it was probably not enough to pay ourselves. It absolutely wasn't enough to pay ourselves, but it was great to make an in within the local government. Liisa and I have branched out. We got a call from somebody we both know in different ways to do something for carbon rebate. I did something for Let's Talk Climate to Me, which is a women's group, where I did a short film about a letter from the future, talking to us about what it's like right now. And that's a wonderful initiative that you can join for free and sit with a group of women who need to educate, who need to catch up on the basics, the 101s of climate, and then they go through a 6-week course. It's pretty great. So next up, as Liisa said, is the provincial election. And I am working on a feature script, and I want to do a web series. So if anybody out there wants to join our group, you can visit us at thisisnotadrill.ca, right, Liisa? Yeah, thisisnotadrill.ca. You don't need to be a specialist in filmmaking. We invite you to come and join and give whatever you can. If it's time, if you can hold a boom, you can help make craft service, you can donate a location, but we're looking for recruits. We always are, and people who are passionate, because really it's passion, which is what keeps us going. That's what I think just keeps moving us forward. Gord, anything else you want to add?
No, I wonder if there's any other questions. I wanted to bring up the topic of money, because the tricky thing is we can donate all of our time and so on, and we did, but there's always the tricky business of getting the message out there. So we are also working on strategies to figure out how to circumvent Mr. Zuckerberg's money pit, as there is no what is called organic reach anymore. You can't just have a video go viral. So that's, I throw that out there because there may be people out there who have creative ideas about how an organization like ours could secure some serious funding in order to propagate these ideas that are lacking in the public sphere. Back to you, Sandy.
Yeah. There is another question, and it's a good one. How has the presence of more cultural and ethnic diversity, how has the BIPAC presence, or has it changed our process? I have to say, from my observation from our regular meetings, that we're still pretty white, pretty settler heavy. But the other thing I guess I'd like to mention that ARCA, we're not just involved with film. I know that the central theme here is outreach, digital outreach. We take part in live actions too, and people might want to talk about that a little bit. And there's lots of that going on. And if you know how to make a nice giant puppet or something, and you get involved with your community around these issues. But Liisa, one of the Liisas, maybe you'd like to talk about the BIPOC issue. Liisa, you brought it up, Liisa Robertson. So we've got a couple of amazing people who don't happen to be old white guys like me. But let's talk.
I don't mind taking it. It was great because it's always, we're actually a pretty small group. I would say that there's only about 15 to 18 people who come in and out. And like over the big campaign that we did, the 2019 campaign, there was over 100 artists, Canadian artists that were involved all in all, but the kind of central group. So in all that original group was all probably like, our youngest member was like 40 and most of us, maybe all of us are white and mostly over 50. And that's, your friend group. So actually the Transform TO campaign that we got was really, because it's difficult to reach out and say, like, join our group for no money and work your ass off. And so that was an opportunity that we had so that we could reach out to BIPOC artists and pay people. And so then we just made some really beautiful connections with people. Some people only stayed for that project. And then some people have stuck around and are just amazing, original, creative people that it's really wonderful to have on side, but they're old too. It's just challenging to kind of do all this stuff for free and expand the group, not just in terms of diversity, but even just getting any more people at all is a challenge, because it takes energy. So I don't know if that answers your question.
One of the things that we didn't realize we'd have time to maybe discuss is we had another kind of major project that we undertook, which we called Green Sessions, in partnership with Soul Pepper Theatre Company, which is a great theatre company in Toronto. But it was an online event, so it was a national event. It was 2 full days, or pretty close to full days, or were there 3, of online sessions, and we were able to, through our connections, through our community, with the theater community, we were able to get great people like the English woman who wrote Donut Economics, which a lot of you in this audience probably have read. Wonderful there. We had David Suzuki, we had Naomi Klein, and we had an extraordinary, this is to the BIPOC issue, we had an extraordinary representation from the Indigenous communities. We adopted what many people, thankfully, in this movement have adopted, which is that recognizing that it's a smaller group, that people who are activists are overtaxed, and if anyone deserves an honorarium for after several hundred years of being taken advantage of, it's these people. And so we managed to put together a budget, and we were able to compensate people at least with an honorarium for their time. But we had some extraordinary leaders from the Indigenous community that moved us and informed us. And one of the things that, there's a growing recognition that it's not just the climate change, it's not just the physics of it, it's not just the forest fires and the floods, it's also social, it's eco-anxiety, it's climate grief. These things have to be addressed, and stories are the way to address them. And Liisa talked about, both Liisas talked about, the need for a positive vision of the future. That's what I want for my grandsons, So I'm just kind of vamping here a bit, because those are the questions that we got. I hope everyone hasn't abandoned us, since Chuck made it sound like the day was over when we started. But we can always talk amongst ourselves. But who's got some other thoughts to share? And let's jump in.
Well, I just got another example of kind of people doing it for themselves is, and that we're helping support, but this group's Seniors for Climate Action got connected with us, and they wrote an excellent script. This person had never written anything in her life, and she's done some community theater, and it is a dynamite script, and we're going to help her realize it. But it's just realizing that we have, all of us, so much creativity inside us. We understand, like, just letting the messages that you want to see out there in the world, feeling like you can take a shot at making them, and then you'll get feedback, and people say, oh, this worked and this didn't work, and then you can go from there. But we're in this group, even though we're all artists, we're all doing jobs that we've never done before, and so I would just encourage people to have faith in their voices, and just put it out there, just do it.
I think too, I hope I can say that one of our goals as artists too is to shift the zeitgeist of society, if I can be permitted to say that if we can present a world that people can accept and get excited about, then they may be able to conceive of a changed world. And so I consider that to be our jobs. And if anybody out there is, interested in finding out more about that, then they should get in touch with us and help us to realize what may be a piece of information that they have or a campaign that they have that we might be able to help them with. We're always looking for collaborators.
There is a movement, I think in significant part sparked by ARCA, which was totally organic and quite amazing, which is SCALE. I forget exactly what SCALE stands for, but it's across the country. It's some of our larger institutions through the green sessions I just talked about. A bunch of what we call A-house theaters, the larger theater companies in the country, have put in a few $1,000s each. We're starting to build a war chest there and a database of artists who can work on these issues. So I don't know if people are across the country who are attending this conference. I hope so. But one of the things we want to do is create talent pools of artists, performers, filmmakers, whoever, creative people who are ready to take part in a project if you have a local community building project around the climate issues. And when the crazy convoy took over Ottawa, my hometown, it was like, and all the climate group meetings that I went to just shortly thereafter was like, why can't we get people moving on that scale? It's only the hate and the negative, and we're going to pull down the government. And what about the people with that positive vision? We've got to put that positive vision out there. And we're vamping now, folks. So I'm sure somebody else has something wonderful to say. We haven't heard from Liisa Robertson in a few minutes.
It's 4:30. So I think it's time to pass it over to Mark, right? Isn't it?
Let's do that then. Yes, and thank you very much, Waterloo. Thanks, Waterloo. And we hope to do more of this kind of work. We're available.